With interest rates hovering around 8% for 30-year mortgages, I'm being asked all the time, does it really make sense to buy a house right now? Those that are thinking about moving, those that are PCSing, those that are thinking about maybe investing in a rental property, whatever it may be, people are really anxious and questioning, does it make sense to buy a house when interest rates are at 8%, or are there other options? Buying a house is truly one of the most critical decisions of your financial life. So getting this decision right is super important for your future and your family's wealth. So let's dig into the considerations that you need to go through when you're deciding now in late 2023, does it make sense to buy a house right now with elevated interest rates that a lot of us have never seen before? To me, there's three main considerations when you're deciding, is now the right time for me and my family to buy a house? One is, how long are you planning on staying in the house? Two, how does that house fit into your budget? And three, what is the housing market like in the area that you're moving to? So let's dig into these three. I do tend to think that your personal circumstances are most important when you're thinking about this decision, not necessarily interest rates or the housing market in general. I'm much more interested in, what does it look like for you and your family? What's your budget? How long are you staying there? Those are the things that are really moving the needle in this decision. So the first consideration, how long are you planning on staying in the house? So this is a really important consideration. If we're thinking about staying in a house for a few years, maybe we're an officer moving around in the military. Maybe we know we're going to be moving for one reason or another. Or we have a growing family. We're buying that 3-bedroom house that maybe we will outgrow in 5 years with a growing family. This is something that you really need to consider. With very high interest rates, if you look at an amortization table, you're going to be paying mostly interest up front for those first few years. You're really not going to be eating into the principal of that loan. This is especially true if you're using a VA loan, because a lot of times if you use a VA loan with, let's say, 0% down, most people are going to roll that funding fee, which can be anywhere from 2.3 to 3.6% into the loan, and then they're going to owe more on the house than it's even worth at the beginning. So you're going to be paying only interest. You really won't build much equity on that home the first few years. So if we're going to stay there only for a few years, it might not really make sense to buy. The other consideration, I guess, when you're considering buying that home is, are you going to keep it and rent it out? Now, this is something that is tough to know for sure. If you're 100% on being a landlord and real estate investing and keeping that thing and renting it out for many decades to come, this is a rental that will pay off someday. Like, we'll pay the mortgage off someday because we're just going to own it for so many years. When rates potentially go down someday in the future, whether that's next year or in 10 years, we have the opportunity to refinance, and it fits in our budget, right? If all those things are true, then maybe buying can make sense for you. So that duration of time, really, that you're going to own the house, a reasonable duration of time. If you're unsure, this is a consideration that, again, with 8% interest rates, it's a tough pill to swallow to go and buy a house, banking on the fact that you're going to be in that house for many years, or you're going to own it or want to own it for many years. If you have not gone into home ownership before, you've never owned a house, you've never had a rental, you've never been a landlord, going and jumping into home ownership with this level of interest rates is probably not advisable. So that's that first big personal consideration. How long are we planning on staying in the house? Again, longer. We're going to own that house, or we're going to stay in it longer. Okay, buying might make a little bit more sense. If we're not really sure, or we know for certain that we're going to move out of that house, then maybe renting is going to make more sense. Or if we're just moving from house to house in the same city that we're in right now, maybe just keeping that current mortgage might make more sense. The next big consideration is, how does that house fit your budget? So when you go and apply for a loan, they're going to look at, what is that debt rate that you have compared to your total gross annual income. And what they're going to try to do is keep that under 28% for that mortgage, and then as a gross number for all of your debt, under 36%. So your debt payment shouldn't exceed 36% in aggregate of your income, and then for the housing portion shouldn't exceed 28%. That's kind of the rules of thumb. I really like less than 25% even for that mortgage, just because things can get a little risky and a little hairy if we take on too much debt and then we lose a job, we move. Again, we're paying all interest up front, so we're not really building a lot of equity in that house very quickly. So do you have good credit? That's a consideration. If we've got great credit and we qualify for those best rates, usually that's 760 or above is typically what we're shooting for to qualify for the best rate. If we've got great credit, then we're getting that best rate available today. If our credit needs some work and maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, buying a house might make more sense because we're going to then be able to increase our credit score 50, 100 points and qualify for a better rate. Well, then that's a consideration to maybe hold off on buying for now. Do you have a down payment? This, especially for military members and veterans that can use the VA loan, like this can be really advantageous to put money down to save money on the funding fee, the VA funding fee that is going to be charged if you put less than 20% down, if you're using a VA loan. I'm an advocate of putting money down when possible because you're going to lower your overall risk. You're going to, if you're using a VA loan and you are subject to the funding fee, you're going to reduce that funding fee or eliminate it. And you're going to own more of that house, especially in an environment where we're in 8% interest rates. Think about every dollar you put down on that house is a dollar that isn't being charged at 8% on that annual basis, right, of interest rates. So you can think about that almost as investing your money at an 8% guaranteed rate of return versus maybe putting it in a CD or a savings account that's going to pay maybe 5% right now. So definitely something to think about as you're thinking about how this fits into your budget. It's also going to make your payment more palatable with your income. So if we were able to put more money down instead of sticking it in a savings account, we're going to bring that payment down. We're going to qualify for more house. We're going to be able to afford that payment a little bit better. Are you giving up a mortgage that you have right now? So that's something to consider. If we're just moving from house to house in the city that we're in, does it really make sense to give up maybe a 2.5 or a 3% mortgage rate? This is only 2 years ago that people were able to obtain mortgage rates at 2%, 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%. This is not very long ago, 2 or 3 years ago. So are we giving that up, and why? Can we stay in that house a little bit longer and really stretch that out? Because most people are going to double or even some instances triple if they're moving to a way bigger house, going from a 3% to an 8% mortgage. Your mortgage payments are going to double, potentially triple. So really think about, what are we giving up in terms of our current mortgage situation? And then think about, can we give up something else? Like if we're going to increase our mortgage to take up 25%, 28%, 30%, whatever it may be of our income, what could we maybe give up to make that a little bit more doable? So can we give up our car payment? Maybe can we trade out our $60,000 car for just a $25,000 used car? Like where can we give? Can we maybe not go out to eat as much, and that gives us more dollars to spend on the house? So if a house is important to you and buying that new house is important and we need to get into an 8% mortgage right now, that's okay and it fits the budget. But what else can we do to make that a little bit more doable for our household budget? So think about, what are those levers we can pull? What else can we give up if that house is really important to you? The last consideration is, what is the housing market like in your area? So every area of the country is much different, especially since COVID. Every area of the country has grown a little bit differently in terms of housing prices and housing availability. So are there a lot of rentals available in your area? Some areas may have lots of rental houses available, ready for you to jump right into. Others, you can only buy. So, wherever you're moving to, what does that look like for you? Is it a spot where you really want to live in a new house and there's no rentals that are newer? They're all way older, and a new house is really, really important to you. Okay, then buying might make more sense. Are there lots of rentals available? If there's lots of rentals and prices are high, interest rates are high, can you rent for maybe a year and then see if it makes sense to buy maybe a year from now? The thing about renting that is appealing is that it's not an irrevocable decision, nor is buying a house, but it's much more permanent than renting. We can rent for a year. We can rent for 6 months. We can rent for these specified periods of time, and then we can make a decision later about whether to buy. Buying a house is a costly decision that is very difficult to unwind quickly. So if the rental market is strong in your area and you're not really sure, renting can make a lot of sense. It is definitely not throwing money away. There's so much to home ownership that people don't think about, from maintenance to HOA to property taxes to just the headache of having to keep up the home and deal with all this stuff. There's a lot that goes into home ownership that nobody really thinks or talks about when they're making these decisions. Usually it's all about renting, throwing money away, and buying a house builds equity and builds wealth. Those things can be true in a way, but also if it's not the right time for you or your family to get into a house, renting is certainly not throwing money away. So a really good resource for seeing what housing is like in your area is the NerdWallet Buy or Rent Calculator. I'll put that in the show notes. That tells you, in your area, given your budget, given the homes you're looking at, where's that break even for renting versus buying? Because it is really different in every part of the country. I'll also say on this note, be really careful about predictions that are made about the housing market or interest rates. A lot of times real estate agents or various people in the real estate world will say, buying's great, housing is going up in this area, 5%, 7%, 10% a year. Nobody has a crystal ball. They are certainly not fortune tellers. Nobody knows what's going to happen to the housing market next year or in 2 years or in 5 years, as like nobody knows exactly what's going to happen to interest rates. A lot of times you'll hear right now, buy a house now with the budget that you can afford when rates drop because they're going to drop in 12 months. Well, nobody knows that they're going to drop in 12 months. Nobody guessed that we'd have mortgage rates at 8%. If you went back 2.5, 3 years ago and somebody told you that mortgage rates were going to be at 8% in 2023, you probably laugh at them and tell them they're crazy. So nobody has a crystal ball, and making housing decisions based on, your prediction or another person's prediction of interest rates or housing prices in your area is a fool's errand and is really a form of market timing, which has been proven not to work time and time again. So to wrap it up, it really might make sense for you to buy if it fits in your budget, you can afford it, you're going to stay in the house for a long period of time, and buying versus renting makes more sense in that area that you're going to move to or that you're buying in. It might make sense for you to rent or keep a lower mortgage if you wouldn't own the house for a very long time, it doesn't really fit your budget, and there are suitable rental houses available, or you can afford to stay in the house that you're in and keep that lower mortgage for another few years and make a decision at a later time. Whatever you do, make sure that when you make a decision to buy or rent, it's the best decision for you and your family right now, not necessarily the best decision 5 years from now or the best decision the decision that your friend or your neighbor is making. It is very personal to you and your specific financial situation. Your real estate agent, many times, other folks in your life may or may not know what's going on with your personal financial situation, your goals, the housing market you're moving to, all those things. These all play into it. So just know that you don't have to buy a home if it's not the right time for you, and renting is not throwing money away. Buying a home can be one of the best financial decisions you ever make. So you just want to make sure that you're doing it responsibly and getting this decision right, because you only get to do this a few times in your life.